Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Strip by Sia, your podcast for strippers, sex workers, and all the fancy naked people in between, including myself. I am a fancy naked person. I am the host of the show. My name is Steph Sia, aka Kimchi on stage. I just wrapped up a wonderful week at Shaker's Show Lounge. Shout out to all the great people there that came in. It's like Thanksgiving today, and I'm super, super grateful and thankful for everyone that has been listening to the show, giving me great topics to report on and to bring cool guests on to help educate and also to destigmatize the sex industry. And that's basically what this show is about. So every week I bring on different guests. Whether or not they are in porn or in stripping or any type of sex work, or maybe they're in the background, maybe they're a producer, a director, or involved in some other capacity, or maybe they are an ally and they are working to educate the masses, just like the guests that I have brought on this week, and I am very excited. So I am super excited to bring Carlie McPhee onto the show today. She is a sexual health educator, working primarily with youth and with kids, and she is amazing. And it's just really, really cool because actually in my vanilla job, I work with a sexual health education company, and Carlie is my colleague, and it is very rare that my vanilla life and my sex work life intersect. So I am really excited to have these worlds collide and also to bring on the fabulous and very knowledgeable and intellectual Carlie McPhee onto the show. Carlie, are you there?
I am here. Hello, Steph. Thank you for
Hi.
having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you, and I'm just so excited. And I told you this off the air, and I've told you this before, but I've been looking for a sexual health educator to bring onto the show, but like I haven't found anyone that was appropriate or was a good fit until I met you a couple months ago, and I was like, I'm gonna have to bring her onto the show at some point. And that point is now, and that point is today. So, welcome to the
Yay!
show. Hooray.
Yeah. So
So excited.
excited.
So excited. I feel like I may have butchered your intro. Would you like to tell the audience a little bit about yourself in terms of like who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, not at all, not butchered at all. You're very much correct. I've worked in sexual health education for a number of years. Um, I, for a number of years, was working in classrooms with youth and young adults. I've kind of been around the block in a lot of different settings and working with a lot of different communities.
Mm-hmm.
So everything from your nice white suburban, stereotypical, very fearful of porn communities,
Yes.
all the way to really diverse settings and really marginalized or equity seeking communities in
Mm-hmm.
corrections, addictions facilities, anything like that. I also work a lot with service providers. I've done a lot of work with teachers and healthcare providers, building their skills around how to talk about sex and sexuality. And I've done a lot of work with parents and work with youth with disabilities as well.
Wow.
So I've been in the game for a while and kind of been here and there. I'm kind of living more in a research space right now, and then doing some freelance sexual health education, and of course working in sexual health education, developing key messaging, which is where we intersect. So it's
Mm-hmm.
been so lovely to get to know you, Steph.
Yes.
And I'm just really happy to have our conversation today.
Me as well. I am like looking forward to just hearing your expertise, the wealth of knowledge that you have to bring to the table here today, because we are talking about porn, and we're going to be reviewing just briefly a documentary called Raised on Porn, which we'll get into later. But before we start getting into everything in terms of like kids in porn, youth in porn, effects that might have, like and the fear around it, I did you want to tell the audience a little bit about how you got into sexual health education specifically?
Yeah. So my background, I have a degree in pedagogy, a kinesiology degree in pedagogy. So a lot of my undergraduate education was focused around health education, crafting health education. I did a lot of teaching practicums. So from there, I got into a public health career by going to a pizza party, which was random. I went to a pizza party, got a practicum, wound up working in comprehensive school health.
Wow.
So doing health promotion work in partnership with schools. And I landed a job out of university doing that out in the prairies.
Wow.
And then from there, I was on a temporary contract and I was young and I needed a job, and a sexual health team was hiring someone to write them a social media strategy. So they were like, look, you have some health promotion experience, you're a millennial, you know what Facebook is, come on over. And the rest was history. That turned into a job with their sister team, a permanent position, and they made a educator out of me.
Wow.
And then I went on to do a graduate school program specializing in sexual health. And it just was totally my arena. I just loved it. I don't think I'll ever leave sexual health. I've then gone on to work in some post-secondary institutions, sexual health roles. I've done a lot of resource development for some big health organizations. So yeah, I've just been, now I'm slowly but surely chipping away on a communications master's degree. So I'm very much zoomed in on how do we talk about sexuality? How do we craft messages in a way that can invite people in and really, bolster their skills and build capacity so we have positive sexual health outcomes. I'm very excited to discuss with you about porn's role and kind of the, I think, unfair reputation that porn is being assigned these days.
Yes, these days and for a long time now. So
yeah. I shouldn't even say these days. Yeah, it's always been kind of given this bad rap.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, like with porn and sex work in general, sex in general as a really huge umbrella, usually generally just gets like a really bad rep, negative stereotypes. We're usually the butt of jokes and stuff like that. So yeah, we're gonna talk about this documentary that one of my listeners actually brought to the table. Thank you, and shout out to Galigo Smash on Instagram for bringing this to my attention. He actually sent me a link and was like, hey, like, what do you think about this documentary? Like, do you think it's just sensationalization, or do you think there's actually some real merit in this and like it's based on facts? And I'm like, what is this thing? So the documentary is called Raised on Porn, and for those who haven't watched it, it's a 37-minute documentary just available on YouTube, which just came out recently. I mean, by the time this recording, by the time this episode airs out, it's probably been out for about a month. So for those of you listening, I'm actually just going to go ahead and play the trailer really quick. It's just about a minute and a half or so. So just to give you a little bit of substance, and so you can kind of understand what we're talking about here just briefly. So just hang on, bear with me. I'm going to go ahead and press play. Where is it? Here. Okay, here we go. Listen in.
I remember being a kid and looking at a rosebud, and I remember thinking, oh, well, I want it to open up like a rose, so I'll just pull back all the petals. Now I realize you can't force that, and it's very similar to a child's sexuality. If you try to open those petals too early, they will grow and they will open, but they're not going to be the same person that they would have been.
I found porn when I was 11, 12 years old.
We're in this playground and a friend of mine was like, hey, Richie, I want to show you a picture.
We watched porn and he told me, he's like, I watch it all the time, it's not a big deal. But then at some point in it, he stopped seeing women as people because porn distorted his whole thinking.
We are in the midst of the largest unregulated social experiment in human history.
Because internet porn has the ability to cause addiction-related brain changes.
And the free porn, which is the most accessible, is actually the most violent, dehumanizing pornography.
That so many men are now seeing as being normal. This is how it happens.
It's like the heroine of pornography.
And I'm like, I need to experience what I'm seeing.
So he tells me, and it just like felt like I got punched in the heart.
Okay, so that's the trailer, and it's like raised on porn, this whole thing, and yeah, that's just the trailer. That's just the trailer, and I was already getting like a bad feeling. I'm like, is this gonna be good? But luckily, it's only 37 minutes of my life. That wasn't too long or too much of a commitment. But Carlie, I want to hear your thoughts. Like your first impressions on one, the trailer, and two, what you thought of the documentary.
So, before I comment on this documentary, I'm just going to kind of position where I come from as a sexual health professional and an educator. I work from a comprehensive sexual health education framework, which, if you Google that, is kind of the globally accepted best practice of how to do sexual health education.
Right.
And it's very much rooted in the basis that sexuality as a form of identity, in a social relationship sense, in a physical pleasure experience and reproductive sense, is intrinsically part of being a human being. It's supposed to be there. It's part of the human experience. And there's nothing intrinsically bad about human sexuality or experiencing sexuality. Humans are sexual beings, and we experience different phases or different aspects of sexuality our whole life long.
Right.
So when we hear things about, this flower metaphor, for example, that the rose is damaged,
Yes.
that someone is damaged forever if they're exposed to sexual material or, visually, sexually stimulating content, that it will damage them. Like the whole documentary has this sense of permanence.
Yeah. Right.
And that's the first thing I really just, disagree with, is that sense that you're permanently doomed.
Right.
Like, sexuality is a lifelong experience. It's always evolving. It's always changing. You can always come back.
Right.
Even if you do have a negative experience. I don't ever want people to feel like their sexuality is over or they're doomed or there's no way back to having a positive relationship with your sexuality.
Right. Yeah, that's a good theme actually that you picked up on too, because I also picked up on that as well. To be like, I just feel like they were blaming a lot of everything on porn. They were blaming, like literally everything. They were blaming violence against women on porn. They were blaming pedophilia on porn, which they looped in there as well. They're also like blaming like men cheating on their wives on porn, like a lot of that.
Anyone who knows me, people who've been in book clubs with me, who talk about movies with me, they know I consume media with a pretty critical lens. Doesn't mean I don't enjoy media, but I usually go in with my guard quite up, and I'm like, come on, show me what you got, really wow me here. And the red flags that were going through my mind just listening to that trailer, and they did not dispel any of these red flags. They're using highly emotional testimonials that perfectly fit their porn made me do it narrative.
Yes.
They're relying heavily on disproved and harmful gender stereotypes and sexuality stereotypes. There's no evidence-based research presented. You'll notice they only have authors speak on the topic, and anyone can publish a book.
Yes.
Anyone can publish a book. There's no rigor. There's not the same rigor required to publish a book than there is to get published in an academic paper and have your paper cited, over 1,000 times. Like there's a really big difference there in what makes an expert.
Yes.
And there was no examining other perspectives or other sides.
It's very one-sided.
To me, those are all red flags that, yes, it's dressed up in a fancy documentary setting, but those right there tell me, there's probably not a lot of fact behind what they're saying.
Agreed. Yeah. I definitely noticed that as well. And it was just really interesting too, because you touched on a point there, really just harping on like emotion
Yeah.
a lot of emotion and these personal stories that the people at the interview that they brought to the table, like they had a few different kind of scenarios that they were following, in terms of like following some people around about their experiences with porn or their judgment or their views on porn. And they were all, I would say, pretty damaging, but also like it can't be, like it can't be a whole umbrella that you can apply to everything.
No, and all it's doing is, I mean, this is what patriarchal powers always do, is create the perfect out for bad behavior, for abusive behavior towards others, right? So, of course, we can't assign any responsibility to these grown men who are treating their partners like objects in abusive ways. They're not treating them with care. They're not prioritizing their pleasure. Oh, well, they saw a porno video when they were 13, so that's destroyed their brain forever.
Yeah.
These people aren't living in a vacuum. Like, look at any other form of media. Look at how their parents, treated each other growing up. Like, there's all these other influences that would have built in that ideology to not treat their partners with respect, that other people's feelings don't matter. Like, you're going to tell me none of those boys went to elementary school and learned basic, like, treat others how you want to be treated,
Yeah.
Who's to say, like, what is it about porn that outweighs all of these other supposedly perfectly nice, they're a perfectly nice boy from a perfectly nice home? Like, why aren't those values doing anything then?
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're giving porn a lot of power in positioning it as the only source of education, and they're actually robbing parents, teachers, healthcare providers, those, I mean, it's very heteronormative, but those men, they're robbing them of so much agency and power that they have in building healthy sexual health outcomes.
Right.
Which is, it's kind of sad. Like,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And when did porn as an industry ever sign up to be the sex ed teacher?
Right. Good question. And we definitely have some questions in regards to that as well. And some perspectives, which we'll go into the Q&A later on at the end of the show. But yeah, I think like a lot of the concern, and like from what I'm gathering from people that have this kind of stance, is that porn is the only teacher, or the most accessible, and like, why do you think that is? Do you think that parents are uncomfortable having conversations like this with their kids about porn, about sexuality? Or what about the school system too? Like, are they responsible for providing adequate, comprehensive sexual education to kids? Like, there's a bunch of big questions here, so feel free to answer in whatever order.
Yeah, so I mean, when we talk about like what is good sexual health education, and I've kind of given you a loose definition of what comprehensive school health education or sexual health education is, pardon me. It's now been deemed a human right by the UN that everyone is entitled to receive good, informative, comprehensive sexual health education. Yes. People have a right to understand their bodies, understand how relationships work, so they can have more positive experiences, which are related to so many other health outcomes, whether that's mental health, social health, physical health. People have a right to that. We also know, when you look to the literature, that abstinence-only education, which basically frames sex as, something that's only to be done under often very religious frameworks of within marriage, or within a long-term one single partner, and there's a lot of morality politics assigned to like when sex is okay and when it's absolutely absurd. And we have this really narrow definition of like what is an okay and acceptable way for someone to be sexual and express their sexuality, which leads a lot of experience out. So, and that's fine. Everybody can have their own beliefs and values, and, so much of having good sex is having sex in circumstances that feel right and good and awesome for you.
Yeah.
What we're losing is so many people can have sex in circumstances and feel great about it outside of this one view of, what's currently considered moral.
Right.
There's a really great book by Jesse Baring called Perv, The Sexual Deviant in All of Us. And it's a really great read. I recommend it for anyone who's kind of interested in this idea of like where this idea of what's acceptable comes from.
Sure.
The author, Jesse Baring, just really goes throughout history and explores like how much it has changed over time of what's considered socially acceptable in a sexual context.
Interesting.
But anyways, I'm going on a tangent here, but back to comprehensive sexual health education.
That's okay. I'll plug that. Yeah, I'll plug that into the show notes, though. Thank you for that recommendation.
Yeah. It is a human right, but we're still seeing a lot, even here within Canada, we're seeing a lot of people not meeting that standard.
Okay.
So the reality is most kids aren't receiving comprehensive sexual health education.
Okay.
And then there's this fear of, oh my goodness, if my kid sees porn, the fear is real because for a lot of people, there is nothing else there to fill in the gaps or to clarify like what porn actually is.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because like, well, a lot of, I've spoken to people as well, just on their own comments about like I was just curious, like, what was your experience in terms of like sexual health education growing up? Like I posted this question on Twitter and I posted this question on Instagram, and a lot of people said they didn't really have one growing up, or it was just like a lack thereof. Like personally speaking of myself, like I went to a Roman Catholic private school, and we were separated, the boys and the girls, and we watched a video, and that was pretty much my sexual education as a kid when I was like 11, and nothing much more than that. So I feel like there are gaps there.
When we were growing up, and then Action Canada, who is a major advocacy organization in Canada for sexual health rights, and they do a lot of work around sexual health education. They just released a report just this year of kind of what is the status currently. And they said the only thing consistent about sexuality education in Canada is the inconsistency.
Really?
But no one's kind of in a large way, no geographic area is in a large way meeting that expectation and that best practice of sexuality education.
Oh, wow.
So we haven't moved forward as much as we would hope from when you and I were kids. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so disappointing to hear. Oh my gosh.
It is disappointing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, my goal, we want to work ourselves out of a job. I don't want us to need sexual health education specialists, because we want every teacher in every classroom to feel empowered and know exactly what they're doing. We want parents to feel empowered and know how to talk to their kids and, bring in that values piece that can only come from home.
Right.
So there's lots of parties at play who can contribute here that aren't. And I think that's what makes porn so scary.
Right. Okay.
So, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, so like, if I'm really going to give the most generous assumption to whoever made this documentary and put out this really fear-mongering, terrifying message.
Yes.
It's all we can do is use it as a springboard for, at the end of the day, their message is still sexual assault is bad.
Yes.
Surprising your partner with something scary is bad.
Right.
Hurting other people is not okay. Like, that is the message that they did get right. So we can use that as, can we take the heat off of porn, which is an entertainment tool and a way for people to access their fantasy, and we can get more into that.
Yeah.
But it's not your sex ed teacher.
Right. Yeah. Oh my gosh. I have so many thoughts on all of this. So like another takeaway, an impression that I got from the documentary watching that was, I feel like they were using porn as like a gateway to many things.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if you got that too, but like it was a gateway to other extreme forms of violence or assault. In terms of like extreme forms of intimacy or different like kinks that involve violence. And again, like the weird link that they had with pedophilia. I just feel like I'm just like,
This is the thing that's really important is there is no evidence to support that claim.
Right.
And they're dressing up a false claim with that's where like you get the really highly emotional stories to draw people in that way.
Yeah, exactly.
So that they won't notice. Like there are no research papers. You can go on any
major publication,
database, and look at the actual literature that's going through a high standard of rigor to see what's what. And even there, like the one paper I could find that had been cited over 100 times around, I know they talked about brain development, youth brain development and porn use.
Okay.
The one paper I could find that had been cited over 100 times, even they were like, well, it's chicken and egg. Like, are these things we're seeing because our sample, like there's no evidence to show that this will turn you into a deviant that's going to harm other people because you saw porn when you're 13.
Yeah.
You didn't have the tools to like understand what you saw in a real life context.
Totally. Yeah. It was very much like the stance that I got from the documentary was that porn causes X. And that's not the case.
There's no evidence that that's true.
No, absolutely not. Like, I just felt like the documentary was really creating like moral panic.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Totally.
Which is disappointing. But going back to what you said in terms of like this type of education and proper education needs to start at the home. And also, you also mentioned like because there's so many inconsistencies with teaching kids proper good quality education in schools, like, and I remember like in one of our meetings we were mentioning like you were commenting like, oh yeah, some of the teachers like, I don't want to teach this, like I don't feel comfortable teaching this. Like, do you want to comment a little bit about that as well?
Yeah, so I mean, the reason we're at where we are with, and this is just my own opinion of, and maybe I shouldn't make such a sweeping statement that this is the reason. One reason that, there's challenges with sexuality education is our societal norms. And we have a lot of really deep-rooted beliefs and value systems built around sexuality and sexual health and sex and nudity, even just being naked.
Right.
Which in the sex work industry, I'm sure you're well familiar with just the wall of stigma around nakedness alone.
Oh, yes.
Let alone touching someone else when you're naked.
Yes.
So you have a teacher who, one, likely didn't get any support in their teacher education, in their education degree, of how to tackle a really values-laden topic.
Right.
They're in a position where they're working for a specific school board, so they're under certain constraints of what value systems they either have to operate in if you're in a faith-based school board, or you're in a public setting where you're really not allowed, or you kind of have to check your own values at the door.
Right.
So then you have like this really charged topic. And how do you talk about it?
Right.
That's really hard to do. So I can understand teachers cowering and not wanting to deal with it.
Right.
And then there's the sense of, well, I didn't get much when I was in school and I turned out okay. I figured it out. Why do we need it? I have all of these other curriculum objectives that I need to hit.
Right.
And it just gets bumped down the list because it's a mixture of like, I don't really want to deal with that. Or plus, I have all of these other things on my plate and I turned out okay. What's the point?
Right. Yeah. So there's lots of different pressures and parameters that teachers have to kind of fit in or conform to, which makes their job not easy.
It takes skill to navigate. Like, you have a room of 30 kids who are all coming in with different beliefs and values, different sexual identities, experiences, points of view, and you're supposed to like moderate that according to, you know, where your values sit, where your school board's values sit, having to calm them down and get them through the rest of their day. Like, it's a lot if you haven't been trained how to manage that and, you know, find your ways to navigate through that. Totally. But what we know, and there's actual research evidence to support this, what we know is when kids do receive comprehensive sexual health education, we see STIs go down, we see unintended pregnancies go down, we see later sexual debut or first time having sex. When they have all the information, we see all of those negative outcomes that we're afraid of, that parents are afraid of, that this documentary is capitalizing on. We see those numbers go down because they know what to do. They have all the tools in their toolbox.
Right.
And the porn piece that comes in is when teachers are probably like, I can't talk about porn in my classroom.
Right.
How can I do? I used to work in an office where we worked in sexual health, and we would get notices from IT all the time that are like, why are you trying to watch porn at work? And we're like, it's work related. I'm answering a grade 7 student's question box question. Like Google search history is weird, but you know, this is the work.
Yeah.
So there's all these built-in layers of like, with porn especially, like, you can't talk about porn, you can't bring up porn, you can't address porn.
Right.
But you need to.
Absolutely.
Kids have access to the internet. It's intrinsically part of their world now. So we need the sexual health education piece and the media literacy piece have to come together.
Right.
Which is kind of a sophisticated thing to teach or to bring in for you. But it's essential. And that's the problem, not porn existing. Because there's lots of people who use porn and are perfectly normal and fine and happy, healthy relationships, and you know, porn's fun.
Totally.
It's something great for them to use. It's not the problem. It's a smokescreen in front of how do we deal with this mess of media literacy, comprehensive sexual health education, and I don't know where to start that's going on behind it.
Totally. So, like, where do you think, like, how can we bridge the gap between that? And, like, who's responsible for that, would you say?
So that's an interesting question. And personally, I'm of the mind that, you know, it takes a village. I think, you know, there's pieces that teachers can realistically do with the right support, the right training, the right resources. You have to set teachers up for success to implement that comprehensive sexual health education.
Right.
Teachers are some of the busiest people. They get like 5 minutes to eat their lunch. They're supervising detention at lunchtime. They got bus duty. Like, you got to make things really easy for teachers. You really have to set them up for success. Parents and families can really bring in that values piece of what are your values at home? How does that relay into your sexual decision making and your relationships and how you treat other people?
Right.
Like, that is something that can come from home. You know, then there's holding like the media accountable.
Right.
You know, everything from, and I'm not an expert in any of these things, but like movie ratings, what's appropriate? When are we going to start challenging these like really harmful stereotypes being so steeped into every type of media? I'm a nerd and I still watch Riverdale because I want to know what teens are watching. It's a terrible show. But like, you know, it's 2021 and they have the characters like, you know, they're just using all of these women as objects. And it's annoying to watch because it's just like, these kids need time. The teen years, they need time to understand how things work and that porn looks different than how sex feels. And how relationships feel.
Great point.
And there's time to build that understanding. So I know one of our questions today. Can I jump to this question?
Yeah. Do you want to go right into questions? Because we can also do that too. Or do you want to like?
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a whole bunch of questions, but let's do it.
This was the question. Like, should there be approved websites for under 18
Right.
year olds? Do you want to read that question?
Yeah, it's the first one, so let's do it.
Okay, great.
Oh yeah, maybe I should just read out the question.
Yeah.
So
What's your, I know you have the full question.
Yes, I have the full questions here. Sorry, everyone listening. We actually pre-screened some questions earlier just to make sure they're all appropriate. But the question here comes from a listener. They're asking, should there be porn-approved websites for 18 years old and under? And they mentioned that they're going to find it anyways. And Carlie, what's your thought on that?
I think they're right that it's out there, and the chances of a kid who's using the internet seeing naked people the chance is almost 100% that they're going to see that.
Definitely.
Probably by the time there's research that, like, you know, most kids by the time they're 13 have had porn come across the screen at least once.
Right.
Usually uninvited, but still. I think instead of a website that's like 18 and under approved, because then you're just getting into like, well, according to who? Like, whose value?
Totally.
Which then we're kind of right back to like demonizing certain types of porn or certain images and not others.
Yeah.
I'm like, could we like have them complete their sexual health education to a comprehensive best practice standard? But in real life, that's probably not possible. To like have them complete a quiz or something before they're like going into a porn website.
Right.
But yeah, I think there is just that. This is where this flower analogy from that documentary really bothers me, is that like it's too late if they've already seen it. Like they're lost and they're just going to become this monster sexual deviant that's hurting other people.
Right.
No, like, so you saw some porn. Let's talk about it. Let's unpack what you saw. Let's understand. Just like when you watch a movie and someone gets invited to a party, they don't show you all the back and forth of like, well, I'm one block over, I'm lost. What's the address? I'm lost. And like all the minute details of making plans, because that's boring. They just get you to the party because that's more interesting to watch.
Of course.
It's the highlight reel.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
In real life, there's all of these other things that take place, like having your consent conversations, you know, someone farted and you have to laugh about it and then get back to it or whatever happens.
Yeah.
Porn just takes that out, and that's the fun of porn. Right? And you just need to understand that, and then you're fine. You're not damaged forever. And it's just understanding to not completely base your expectations on a piece of media.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I feel like that's where like a lot of concern might come from, because we all know, I mean, listeners of the show will know that, you know, porn, as with a lot of sex work, like we're playing a role, and a lot of times it's a fantasy. And like when you watch a porn, it's like 2 minutes, maybe 2 minutes max. You're watching into it, and then they're already fucking. You know, like it doesn't work that way. Like there's foreplay, there's like lots of things that have to go on before. You know, like it's not just like boom, we're ready to go, and she's wet already. Like it just doesn't work that way. But I mean, there's a lack of understanding there when it comes to kids and to youth, and that they think that is what reality is. Right? So.
Which, you know, very much is like, I wish people would just leave porn alone to be that, to be what it is, which is fantasy and fun and, you know, just giving everybody a break mentally to take the hiccups out of it and just enjoy the highlight reel. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we don't have to put porn in the sex ed bucket.
Right. Yeah. Do you find, and this is a question just randomly for you, do you find that porn is usually discussed and like intermingled in sex education?
It depends where you are, and again, like who's doing the educating and what constraints they're under. So I've been in circumstances where I'm really hoping someone asks me in the question box, because then I'm allowed to talk about it, because I'm answering someone's specific question.
Okay.
And then I can be, mindful to make sure I'm giving a full comprehensive answer to give anyone in the classroom who might be wondering about porn or who might already be watching porn some context and some information.
Totally.
But is it built into curriculum objectives? Not necessarily.
Right.
Is it something we could easily build into curriculum objectives? Absolutely. There's so much education going on around media literacy these days. Why can't we make, sexualized media part of that conversation?
Good point. That's a really great question, because sex is everywhere, whether we like it or not, right? So another question. Sorry, continue. I have so many questions.
Go ahead. Let's keep trucking.
Yeah, I mean, like, along with this question too, when you say, like, let's talk about it, and, like, if you do get a question from some, like, a young adult or a child or something asking about porn, like, how would you approach that conversation? Like, just really brief spark notes. I know you can't get into all of it today.
I mean, questions around sexuality, you're usually getting, like, you can kind of file them into different folders.
Okay.
You have your permission-seeking questions, where someone might say, is it okay if someone watches porn every night before they go to bed? You might get just, like, straight clarification or kind of myth-busting questions, like, I heard porn will melt your brain. Is that true?
Right.
Or you might get, the, like, shock value questions, which you can still turn into a really teachable moment. Like, can you explain what, a hot Carl is? I saw it in a porn movie. Which, if you're in a junior high class, you can probably guess why they're asking that question, but you can still answer it.
Right.
So, a formula I use to answer questions is, one, I'm going to define the terms in that question. I'm going to provide, if it's something that might be upsetting to students, I'm going to provide hey, we're going to talk about, something that might involve gender-based violence or intimate partner violence.
Right.
And give them a heads up at the beginning of the class and before that question comes up. Define all of your terms of, like, what is porn?
Right.
You can add in, like, why people use porn. And then just really, like, break it down for them. And then you can bring in that media literacy piece of, let's not confuse porn as an instruction manual. Porn is a form of entertainment.
Right.
And if you've gone to the movies, you can clearly understand what's realistic and what's not. We have to apply that same thinking cap when we're watching things like porn.
Great. That's a really, really great approach. And I know we have, like, a lot of, moms and parents and of all kinds on this show as well. So hopefully, like, this will be a good takeaway for them as well for when they decide they want to have that conversation with their family. So,
and the number one thing for parents is they think if their kid hears about it, they'll want to do it. And that's actually, like, there's evidence, there's research to show it's actually the opposite.
Oh, wow, that's really interesting.
Kids know what someone's talking about, if someone's asking them to do a certain sex act, or if someone's talking to them about something, them having the knowledge and understanding what the heck someone's talking about puts the decision-making power back in that kid's hands. Like, then they can make a fully informed decision for themselves, rather than being like, yeah, okay, that's not, like, I have no idea what you're talking about, but I don't want to be embarrassing and say I don't know. I guess I'll just go along with it and see what happens.
Right.
That's where you're getting into cross-boundary territory. People are getting upset, and it's not okay, right?
Right, absolutely.
Information is power.
Okay. That is a great, oh my gosh, such an in-depth answer to that question. And there's still lots of questions here, so why not?
I'll try to keep it a bit shorter.
No, I love it. Keep going. I like the full detail. My listeners also like full detail as well, so please keep going. I don't have anything after this anyway, so it's all good. And this one is more, okay, so some context here. This question is asking, please share websites of good, real people having consensual sex. And I'll read you actually more of the paragraph here. So they said, I tried to think of a question that might not come up in your interview, but I know of a couple sites describing what I asked, but it might be useful to share with the audience. So they were saying, basically, this person was saying, I was allowed to watch and read whatever I wanted growing up without discussion, like without any open discussions about sex with their parents. So like adult magazines, R-rated movies, porn. And all of that was his sex education. And all he learned in school was how to put a condom on a banana and what STDs can do to your body. So yeah, he's wondering if you have any good resources on, like in terms of websites of good real people having consensual sex. If you know any.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not a porn expert by any means. I think the things that come to mind for me is one, like a lot of porn, like you hear the term ethical porn being thrown around a lot.
Yes.
Most porn is ethical porn. Most porn is planned in advance. Everyone is there by choice. They're being paid. And, you know, they know exactly what's coming their way. The porn industry is not running on exploitation in the sense of, you know, people being forced into the porn industry.
Right.
There are people lining up down the block who want to work in that industry. So, you know, most porn is consenting adults doing things.
Right.
One website I know of that just has kind of a lighter touch, and they just really show a little bit more of like the before and the getting warmed up and the consent piece. Lesco is a great website. I think that's how you say it.
Okay.
I can message you the website after to make sure we get the name right.
Yeah, for sure. And we'll plug it in the show notes as well.
But the other thing I'll say is, in addition to finding porn that shows, you know, more realistic expectations of sex, educating yourself on sex and sexual health is important. So a great website for Canadians is sexandyou, the letter U.ca. It's written by the Society of Obstetrics and Gynecology of Canada. So the best experts we have in this country write that website. So that's the education piece to go with the porn.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, if I can share a little bit too, I know of like X Confessions. Yeah, I know X Confessions is one of them. It's more like indie style porn. So if you're into that, you could also check that out. Lust Cinema is another one. It's more like feature length films available if you're into that. It just depends on what you're looking for. If I can just think of like grassroots things, you could also subscribe to your favorite OnlyFans creators, including myself, and like ManyVids, stuff like that. Like there's a lot of great porn out there that is available to you. Like a lot of people are probably trying to think or look for a website like Pornhub, or the equivalent of Pornhub in an ethical kind of manner. But as Carlie said, a lot of it is consensual. And if you need to hear more information on porn, I do have some great episodes, including the one with Jessie Black, to give you a bit of context there, as well as the one from last week or a couple weeks ago with Malcolm Lovejoy, Carla Lane, like Samantha Mack. Like I've done many interviews on porn stars and what their experiences have been, what goes on behind the scenes, and it's not just like, as Carlie mentioned, it's not as exploitive as you might think, or like what Mia Khalifa might say or claim. A lot of it is like two consensual adults having a great time on film. So FYI, and I'll plug some of those links in the show notes if you haven't checked it out already. So that's that. I guess we'll continue on to the questions because there's just so many. The next question is, why don't parents have parental controls on all of their kids' devices?
It's a great question, and I know there's like kind of different camps or opinions on parental blocks,
right.
Which is a whole conversation that we probably won't go into.
Yes,
but I mean, I imagine there's a variety of reasons. One, oh my gosh, there's just so many apps now.
Yes.
A lot of parental blocks don't really actually accomplish what they say they can accomplish. Look at this Facebook whistleblower that we're seeing in the news these days, right? Like there's not a sophisticated enough net in place to keep everything out,
right?
According to that family standards. And also, not every parent knows everything their kid is on.
Mm-hmm.
There's new apps all the time.
Yes.
And who knows, parents don't necessarily know everywhere their kids are spending time online.
Mm-hmm.
And things sneak through.
Yeah. And that's the thing, as you mentioned, there's so much innovation nowadays, and there's too many things coming out, and you just don't know what websites or what apps your kid might be on. So it's really, really, really hard to try and regulate all of that.
Yeah.
So,
especially if a parent's been on, 2 or 3 apps and finds that they're not very helpful anyway, or it's a lot of work to keep them updated if you're always having to update keywords and so on and so forth.
Right.
They might just, it's overwhelming.
Yeah, it's really, really difficult to gatekeep a lot of the time. So keep that in mind. So we don't have a full answer for that, but those are just some, like a peek into why. So thank you, listener. Yeah. What is the age for appropriate talks, and what are the signs kids have toxic sexual information?
Yeah, so, I think it's never too early to start talking about sexuality and sexual health, and, little kids, like, they want to know what sex is, and it's usually the, like, where did I come from conversation. But if you think about it, like, healthy sexual relationships come out of healthy friendships and just healthy connections with other people. It's all the same ingredients in a recipe to make a healthy sexual connection with someone as it is to have a good friendship, to connect with other people in a positive way. So you can be building a lot of the groundwork before you get to maybe the porn conversation. Beforehand, and it's to your benefit to start talking about, what is sex, what are body parts, what are the proper names for body parts,
right?
What are healthy relationships. You can do all of those building blocks from, as soon as they can talk, walk, understand things. And then when they do get to, junior high or 12, 13 years old, even 10, 11, they're primed for that conversation because they know they can talk to you about it. It'll feel more normalized because you've been talking about these kinds of things their whole life. And then you can kind of bring it up and address, like, kind of when we're starting to go on the internet, I think is a great time to address it. It's part of that media literacy and, what kinds of things are on the internet and what to do. And you might see things that you don't understand or that feel weird. And here's what you can do about it. Here's who you can talk to. And then you can be that kind of constant, like, let's pull this back into focus and reframe what it is you're seeing.
Right.
Signs of toxic information. I would say, like, toxic information is no information. Porn isn't toxic. It's just out of context for kids.
Yeah.
So signs that maybe they're getting information that they can't pull into context or they're misunderstanding would be, I think you just see it come up in their relationships. Unfortunately, again, because of sexual health stigma and sexuality, and privacy is not a negative thing, but because of the privacy around sex for many people, it can be hard to spot.
Definitely.
So, it might be someone who's getting into a relationship with that person that will see it first before other people.
Yeah, and you won't really see it unless you're in that relationship most of the time. Yeah. So good information here. Does sexual health testing, condom use, how to use birth control, long-term outcomes of youth pregnancy, does that belong in the school system, or is that more so at home, and why or why not?
So that's a great question, and I feel like we touched on it a bit earlier as well.
We did, yeah.
It's very, that is the question, right? We're in North America. I'm speaking in a North American context here because that's where I work and where I live. that's where we're really stuck. And if you
Right.
look at the states, it's very interesting seeing that some states are very much swinging towards comprehensive sexual health education and saying like this absolutely belongs in schools. Schools really working to engage parents. And then you have like this abstinence only, like we're going to teach this just from a like, you don't need to know about that. It's not important for you.
Yeah.
Just don't do it.
Yeah.
Which then would be coming from school and home. I think having school and home together, working together to fill in the different pieces of the puzzle, or everybody doing the whole thing, that's great.
Yeah.
You know, I think the more places we can get positive, comprehensive sexual health information. I used to teach a brownies group and I would go in and do their puberty badge with them. Like, that's a community group where they were kind of working some sexual health education in.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was really cool. And like, you know, that's a bunch of kiddos that maybe their teacher at school wasn't doing that for them,
Right.
but there was another access point where we could get them some great info.
That's great.
So yeah, I'm very much the school of it takes a village, and the more places that they're seeing consistent information, they're more likely to absorb it, they're more likely to believe it, and incorporate it into real behaviors.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it definitely requires many adults and also their peers to help, you know, facilitate this type of education in a really meaningful way. So, but yeah, like I think as you mentioned, like we have a long way to go. So, yeah, unfortunately.
The one other thing I'll say on this, when you look at the literature, studies that have asked youth themselves, where do you want to learn about sexual health? Parents were number one and school was number two.
Wow. Really? Wow.
So, like, that's parents' invitation in. Like, your kids want those conversations. They want to find a way to learn from you. So, and there's lots of resources out there to help kind of create that environment at home.
Totally. Wow, that's really surprising to hear for me, but also really heartwarming and
It's nice, isn't it?
Totally. Wow. Very cool. Yeah. Okay, just a couple more questions. What role does the government play in controls of online content?
Great question. I don't know if I am like the person to answer that question. Things I can speak to is the roles government. I can't really speak to their control of online content. I would say currently you can see government bodies actively contributing to stigma. There's lots of, you know, in the States, I think it was like Iowa in 2019 had like some bill that like porn was a public health crisis or something.
Oh gosh.
And it was brought forward in a government house.
Wow.
You know, and then it's like all of these lawmakers, like who's going to stand up and in their like place of work and be like, actually, I love porn, and you know, it's, like the stakes are so high, it's hard to go against that rhetoric in a government setting.
Totally.
So I think it's a high stakes role that government has to play. In terms of sexual health education, you know, curriculum objectives come from government. So that's somewhere where they have the opportunity to play a role and, you know, better align their outcomes with the education that kids have access to.
Right.
And even things like, you know, there's opt-in, which means you send a letter home to the kids and your parents have to actively opt you into being allowed to attend that session versus opt out. We're sending a letter home. If we don't hear from you, we're assuming your kid has permission and they're going to be attending this, like the numbers you get of opt-in versus opt-out. You know, opt-out being much more inclusive, you'll get much higher numbers of kids.
Right. Interesting.
So in terms of online content, I don't think I know enough about the internet. Maybe you know more about that stuff.
Well, I'm not going to be speaking specifically about porn, but like with sex work and online sex work and online services and service providers, we have discussed it ad nauseum on this podcast. On this podcast about laws, especially in American laws, in terms of like Sasta those bills. We also have we also spoke about Section 230 as well on the podcast with Reese Piper. Those are all American laws that really kind of bar sex work, and in terms of more so full service providers. Ads online, like those can't exist anymore, as we all know.
Right.
Yeah, and then in the Canadian context, I mean, we have Bill C-36, which again was enacted in 2014, that also prevents from like the advertising of sexual services online. Which is like in a similar vein. And I know we were speaking about a similar law with the episode with Samantha Knox about Ontario trying to get a bill passed that's very, very, very similar to SESTA as well. Sorry, SESTA as well. That was just a few months ago that I did that episode. So go back and listen to those. There's huge episodes dedicated to those topics. Both in season 3 and season 2. So
interesting.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like we're seeing in the States, like the government kind of beefing with big social media too right now. And I think that'll be really interesting to see how that shakes out, because that'll really shape how much agency the government does have, because so much porn is, owned and housed and streamed by private entities. Right?
Yeah, I'm curious to see how the Facebook trial is going to unravel, because that was really, really interesting. That was a really, really cool piece to read up on, and scary as well, a little bit scary that they allow for that. So if you're not really keeping up with the whole Facebook whistleblower situation, I forget her name, but she worked at Facebook. She worked on in product, I believe, and there was basically... how do I summarize this really quickly? They were allowing for the algorithm to kind of encourage harmful content or content that would encourage harmful behavior in youth or kids, like specifically around
a lot around negative mental health outcomes and body image issues.
Yes. Lots of that. So I am really curious to see what the outcome of that's going to be. I forgot to say earlier too, not so much government, but also we were really speaking a lot recently in this season about big banks controlling and having a lot of control in terms of online content, as we saw with the OnlyFans debacle, what we saw with Pornhub. Like Pornhub taking a bunch of their videos out because of MasterCard and Visa drawing out as payment processors. So those are huge things that you should pay attention to. So go listen to the episode with Adri Rose. We have the episode with Paul of Natterish.com, and also pretty much everything from this season. There's too many episodes on these. So
oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to go back and listen to more episodes. You're digging in. I love it.
There's a lot of topics. There's a lot of stuff that affects us, right? So gosh, sorry for the big tangent there. I kind of took over.
I think policy, I would be interested to hear what a policy expert has to say about all of this.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I'd have to bring on more guests. I mean, we brought on some different professors from York U and Simon Fraser. Who else did I bring on? Florida State. On what's happening with different types of legislation and policy making as well. So I'll send you some links privately, but or for anyone else listening. But sorry to hijack the conversation there. There is one more question left as well. So this person's asking, does porn belong in our face versus back channels like IRC? So how I'm considering this question is does porn belong in the mainstream or does it belong underground?
So these are the two things I'm thinking about. Is one, like, kink communities, fringe communities, or part of like what makes them fun and exciting for people is that they're not mainstream. Like that, you know, living on the outside, you know, the challenge of like finding other people who are into what you're into is kind of part of the rush for some kink communities, and I totally respect that. And I think there's some people who actually really want to stay out of the mainstream for that reason. It's part of their culture in whatever kind of sexual community they're identifying with.
Right.
Then again, like, porn kind of already is in everyone's face. Like, it's really easy to find porn. It comes across everybody's screen. Pretty much any... I feel like I just see porn, like, on my screen. Maybe it's because I work in sexual health and I'm on a lot of sexuality-related websites or whatever. But porn, when I'm not looking for it, comes up a lot.
Yeah.
So it kind of is already in our face. I think I want people to have the tools to be able to choose how much they want porn in their face or how much they don't.
Right.
But also to feel equipped to deal with it when it does pop up.
Right.
That's what I want. And I know that's not an exact answer to their questions, but I also don't think I'm the person to decide where porn belongs.
Yeah. That's up to your own agency and your own responsibility in terms of like what you consume, how much you consume.
Yeah.
Right. And I think, like, and there has to be some kind of, I think there has to be some kind of responsibility. Like you need to be able to understand like what you are consuming.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that literacy piece is huge, and that will hopefully take the heat or the demonizing off of porn.
Yeah. Hopefully. Fingers crossed that it like moves in the correct direction.
Yeah, we're trying.
Yeah.
We're trying.
Well, we finally made it through all the questions, and before I let you go, where can we find you?
Yes. Well, one, thank you so much for having me, Steph.
You're so welcome.
You're such a brilliant mind, and you know, doing such a great thing with your podcast. So I'm just honored to be here.
Thank you.
You're catching me in the middle of a rebrand of my own sexual health education services. But I can give you an email if folks have more questions for me. They can reach me at carlie.mcphee at thewholeshebang.ca.
I love it.
Yeah, because that's comprehensive, like the SHE is sexual health education, and I do the whole darn thing, comprehensive sexual health education.
There we go.
Yeah, so, you know, I'm really moving into more of a service provider, parents, teachers, capacity building space, but I do still do individual sexual health education sessions, particularly with youth with diverse abilities. I do a lot of, like, if you've ever seen the show, what is it, Dating on the Spectrum?
Oh, yeah, no, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. A lot of, like, dating coaching and building those skills. But yeah, I'm around. I work in sexual health. I'll have my website up under thewholeshebang.ca very shortly.
Yay.
Yeah, you can find me there.
Perfect. Well, it was so much fun chatting with you. I'm sure we could have chatted for another hour easily.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Holy. We didn't even talk about porn addiction, and that's a whole other thing.
And that's a whole other thing, too. I mean, there's so many different tangents and avenues that we can go down. I mean, again, we might have to bring you on for another episode for part 2, but we'll see.
Yeah.
It was such a nice conversation, nice hour-long conversation we had here. Carlie, thank you so much for joining me today on the show. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime.
My pleasure.
And everyone else listening here, it's new episodes every single Sunday. It's Strip by Sia on Twitter, Strip by Sia on Instagram, as well as my personal, which is Sia Steph. And new episodes coming at you every single Sunday. And we'll catch everyone in for another episode next week. Thank you so much, Carlie.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye, 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 bye.